I was on a road trip from northern Washington to southern Utah to meet up with my family for just a few days around Christmas. For the road trip, I rented an Airbnb along the way. Wasn't looking for anything great. Really just needed a place to sleep. So I found the cheapest place right in the halfway point in Idaho. It was kind of in the middle of nowhere, not near any towns or cities, but it was only a mile off the highway, so it was perfectly convenient for what I needed it for. I left in the morning and started getting close as the sun was going down. The section of Idaho I was in was covered in forest and seemed pretty uninhabited. Not a lot of houses or other places around, except for I guess the Airbnb. After a while of going down the highway, my phone told me to turn off on a very small dirt road. There were no lights or other indications that a path was even there. I drove slowly and carefully for the entire mile down this dirt road until I made it to the cabin. And on first glance, it looked way bigger than I expected. There were no images of the outside on the listing, but it said it was only a single bedroom cabin, so I expected something fairly small. I parked right outside the front. The whole forest around the cabin was dense and dark. I could hear all the birds and animals calling out as the night was coming in. I headed up to the door and legitimately almost had a heart attack when the door suddenly opened. "Didn't mean to scare ya," the man said in an overly friendly voice, and with a wide smile. I was still recovering from the scare, and confused who this guy was and why he was even here. He explained he was Charlie, the owner of the Airbnb. I think he could still tell I didn't understand, and that's when he said, "Your room is right over here." And I realized what this was. The Airbnb was a room in the cabin, not the whole cabin itself. I couldn't believe I'd made a mistake like that. I was sure it didn't say it was a shared living space. But at the time, and under pressure, I figured with the pictures not having shown the outside and it saying it was one room, it all made sense. I followed Charlie in. He led me down the long hallway all the way to the farthest room on the end of the cabin. The hallway was noticeably dark, didn't have a single ceiling light or lamp or anything. Charlie gave me a key to the cabin and to my room, then gave another big smile and said enjoy, leaving me to settle in. I closed the door and tossed my bag on the bed. I really wasn't comfortable with being out in some isolated cabin in the middle of nowhere with a stranger, but it was an Airbnb. Surely it was fine. And the only reason I decided to follow through with it and stay is because I was just there for a single night. I was gonna chill in the room, get some sleep, and head out first thing in the morning. I tried to not overthink it. I unzipped my bag and started unpacking just the few things I needed for the night. A couple minutes in, Charlie knocked on the room door. It made me jump again, because I never heard his footsteps coming down the hall. It was like he had just been standing there. I walked over and cracked it open. His wide, empty smile was beginning to come off as really creepy, and the overly friendly voice he was faking made it even worse. He asked how I liked the room. I just said it was great, trying to be kind and keep the conversation quick. He nodded and told me to holler if I needed anything else. I said thank you and closed the door, but this time I waited for a second. The guy didn't move for an eerily long amount of time before I finally heard his footsteps depart and walk down the hall. I locked the door. Something about that guy really made me uncomfortable. I knew he could have just been trying really hard to be nice and a good host, but it came off as fake and almost uncanny. I stayed in the bedroom for 30 minutes, staying on my phone and just listening to the cabin to make sure Charlie wasn't doing anything weird. I could hear the muffled sound of the TV in the living room start playing after a while, and so eventually I felt good enough to start getting ready for bed. I set my phone on the nightstand to charge, brushed my teeth, then got in the shower. It was one of those old tub showers that looked honestly disgusting. The shower curtain looked fairly new though, and was one of those blurry, kind of see-through ones. I turned the water on and tried to be quick, but only a minute or so after getting the water running, I heard a slight thump from outside the bedroom, like somewhere in the hallway. I moved my body out of the water and tried to listen. I didn't hear anything else, but for a split second I thought I saw something, like possibly a shadow, move in the bedroom. I saw it through the blurry curtain, and immediately opened it and looked out, but didn't see anything. I stood there looking and waiting for a minute, then quickly finished washing off and got out and got dressed. When I walked back into the room, I naturally looked toward the door where I heard the sound from, and felt the blood rush from my face as I saw the bedroom door was cracked open. Not fully wide open, but obviously it didn't matter, because I knew I had locked it. I stood there frozen for a second, then rushed over, slamming it closed and locking it again. Something was seriously wrong with this cabin, and I no longer felt safe at all. Not with Charlie opening locked doors like that. Even just thinking about that stranger walking in with his creepy smile while I was showering gave me chills. I picked up my phone from the nightstand, and while I tried to figure out what to do, I opened the Airbnb app and looked at the listing. I was trying to see if others had reported strange behavior in their reviews. There were only 3 other reviews, giving 5 stars, but honestly, rereading them now, they looked completely fake. And even more unsettling, I realized I hadn't made a mistake at all. The listing said it was a standalone cabin, not some room in a shared residence. Nothing was adding up, or I guess everything was adding up, but in the most unsettling way. I needed to leave immediately. I packed the few things I had into my bag, then went up to the door and put my ear against it, listening to try and hear where Charlie was, and if I could make a quick exit without drawing attention. I heard the muffled TV still playing from the living room, which I knew was right next to the front door. But as I stood there quietly, I started to hear something else. Something soft, coming from inside the room I was in. I slowly turned around. I heard this low, raspy breathing from right where the bedroom closet was. I threw the bedroom door open and sprinted out of there. The living room was empty as I ran past it and right out to my car. I drove dangerously fast down the rugged dirt road until I made it to the highway. And after calling my mom in a panic, she convinced me to make a report with the police. I did, but I'll save you all the unimportant details, because let's just say nothing came from it. His disturbing, creepy behavior wasn't provable, and the only thing he actually got in trouble for was listing the cabin incorrectly on Airbnb. And just to add to the creepiness, Charlie wasn't even his name. Thankfully, the listing was removed for false advertising, and I never saw it get relisted, so hopefully no one else has to go through that like I did. Can't even imagine what would have happened if I didn't leave the cabin that night.
In a world where January is supposed to be boring, one staple of the holidays refuses to end. The great deals at Verizon.
This was a couple of years ago. I was 23. I rented this cabin because I wanted a stress-free vacation. It was early winter, I think 2 weeks after Christmas, which I guess is off-season for these kinds of cabins, so I got a really good deal on it. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was how completely silent it was. If you haven't been to an isolated cabin or spot in the woods in a while, the lack of any sounds is really strange at first. Calm, but also a bit unnerving, acting as a reminder to know just how alone you are out there. Anyway, the cabin itself was exactly like the pictures. Simple and a little old, but overall cozy. I unpacked slowly, made a quick dinner, and spent the night reading by the fireplace. Nothing happened that night. I just went to sleep and woke up feeling great in the morning. I made breakfast and coffee and stayed in for the whole morning and a bit of the afternoon, before getting a little bored. I noticed when I got there that the owner had a rough map hung up next to the front door of a trail behind the cabin, so I decided this was a good time to check it out. Looked like it was just a couple of miles, and from the owner's description was just a simple walking path. I got my jacket and headed out. It was pretty clear right away that this wasn't some nice, well-maintained trail. I think the owner might have made it a few years ago and never touched it again. It was mostly overgrown and very hard to keep track of. And oddly, on the map in the cabin, it only showed a single trail, basically just a loop through the woods. But halfway down, I came across another path splitting from it. I didn't see anything down that way in the distance, but curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to check it. I had nothing better to do anyway. For the first 5-ish minutes, I didn't see anything. Had no idea what the trail could have possibly been there for, or how it was even made. But then I came across a section of the path covered in thick brush. And after pushing my way through it, I found what was at the end. There was another cabin. It was old and rotting, moss on the sides, and dilapidated to the point it was clear that it hadn't been taken care of in decades. It was just about the creepiest looking cabin I'd ever seen, and it being out in the middle of the woods, not all that far away from the one I was staying at, only made it more disturbing. I walked up closer to it and peered into the doorway, which was missing the actual door. It looked the same on the inside as it did on the outside, completely in ruins, and even smelling like rot and mildew. Dust covered every inch of the place, but the one odd thing I saw that stood out the most was a line of footprints on the floor, like scuffs on the wood and in the dust that hadn't faded yet, like someone had been there somewhat recently. My immediate thought was that maybe some person that rented the cabin before had also found this place. But as I was thinking about it, something shifted in the side of my view. When I looked, I saw a black, open doorway. Black as in whatever that room was. It didn't have any windows or lights at all. It looked like a void of darkness past the doorway. Even though it was in the corner of my eye, I was absolutely sure I saw something move right there. I sort of panicked and just ran back to the trail, moving quickly until I made it back to the rental cabin. I couldn't help but have this feeling, almost indescribable, that something really bad had happened in that cabin, or was happening. I don't know. The gut feeling was strong though, and there was no way I was going back there. I locked myself in the cabin and tried to relax. I told myself that likely nothing would come from it. I texted the owner of the rental about the old cabin I found out there, hoping he would confirm it was just an abandoned place on his land and nothing to worry about. An hour later, he texted me back, and I thought his response was strange. He responded with just a single sentence, saying there were no other cabins nearby in the woods. I didn't know how to respond to that, because I just told him that I found the cabin back there. What did he mean there weren't any other cabins? It was like he didn't believe me, or didn't want me to know anything about the cabin I found, almost gaslighting me. I didn't end up saying anything else to him. Over the rest of the afternoon and later into the night, I was able to settle back down and almost forget about that other cabin. Think I eventually was able to convince myself it was just an abandoned, vacant, and forgotten place. No more, no less. I made dinner, had a few drinks, and sat by the fireplace. It was probably around 11 or so, because I know I was staying up pretty late. And really just out of nowhere, that feeling came back. My stomach tightened, and that aching, awful gut feeling grew inside me again. It was very sudden. I sat up from the couch and started looking around, but everything was dark and quiet. So I got up and looked out the window, thinking maybe I unconsciously heard something. The woods were dead quiet. No movement, no sounds. Even the trees were perfectly still and motionless. How calm it looked out there was unsettling. I felt paranoid, which isn't a feeling I was used to. Honestly, that might have been the first and only time in my life I'd ever felt that way. I stared out the window, looking at the dark entrance to the rugged trail behind the cabin. And then, after 5 minutes of waiting, I heard something. A few leaves crunch or sticks snapping right outside of the cabin. Someone was out there, walking around. I followed the sounds, moving toward the front door. I faintly heard the thumps of the person step onto the porch and go right up to the door, and then it went quiet. After 30 seconds, I quickly pulled my phone out, and for some reason, instead of calling the police, I texted the owner, telling him someone was outside the cabin right now, and asking if he knew who it was, or if someone was supposed to be here. I don't know why I didn't just play it safe and call the police first. I think it just felt weird to call the police to someone else's cabin. But eerily, as soon as I sent the text, I heard a phone chime right outside the front door of the cabin. My gut feeling instantly got even worse. It was the owner outside, but why the hell was he here? And why didn't he text me first? Why was he just standing out there? Something wasn't right about any of this, and I knew in the back of my head that this all somehow connected back to the abandoned cabin out there. Even after I heard his phone chime, he didn't text me back. I dialed 911. There were a couple minutes after I got off the phone with the police that I just stood still, waiting in the eerie silence, knowing he was still right outside that door. My biggest fear was knowing that he had to have had a key to the cabin and could just walk in if he wanted to. But for some reason, he didn't. It felt like he was out there, debating whether or not to do something. Eventually, I heard a few thumps on the porch, and then it remained quiet until police arrived. I told them everything, and also showed them the messages on my phone. They immediately went to the owner's main address to talk to him, and he wasn't there. Didn't answer the door and didn't answer his phone, which, if it was him outside the cabin, this all made sense, because there was no way he could have gotten far just walking through the woods. Over the next few days, when they finally got him to talk, he still denied everything. Said he wasn't even at the cabin, and didn't know anything I was talking about. The officers agreed this was all super fishy, and seemed like he was up to something. Or maybe that cabin I found had something he was hiding, but without a search warrant, and without any real evidence of anything. The cops really couldn't do anything else. So I'm not sure what was going on there. Maybe it was partially my fault for having explored further than I should have. But I think things could have been a lot worse if I had tried to dig a little deeper into what was in that cabin.
New Year, same extra value meals at McDonald's. So now get 2 snack wraps, plus fries, and a medium soft drink for just $8.
For limited time only. Prices and participation may vary. Prices may be higher in Hawaii, Alaska, and California, and for delivery.
I lived in what you'd call your typical cabin in the woods. It was a half hour from town, give or take, and mainly just a comfortable, quiet place. It was so far out of the way that in the 8 years I'd lived there before this, I'd never seen or even heard anyone near my cabin. This day, I had basically nothing to do, and at some point in the morning, I went for a walk around my land. I knew it well enough to not need a trail or anything, so I was just hiking through the trees and enjoying the forest when I stumbled on something that immediately was very odd. I was just 300 or 400 feet from the back of my cabin and found the remnants of a campsite, a burnt out pile of ashes from a campfire, and a flat area that looked like a tent had been set up on. From standing there in the middle of the campsite, I could see my cabin between all the trees. That's how close it was. So, whoever this was, they couldn't possibly have thought they weren't on anyone's property. Sort of felt like they meant to be. I did some more walking, looking around for any more signs of someone being around there, but came up empty-handed. It was just that one spot. I don't know how I never noticed them. I think I just never thought to even look around the cabin, having spent so many years being alone out there. But the rest of the day, I didn't see anything. And even at night, I checked the windows and didn't see any clear signs of a campfire or anyone being around. The next few days were all normal. It was a Saturday night that I decided to drink for a bit on my back porch and enjoy the calm forest when I saw an orange glow flickering in the trees. It was from the same spot as where I'd seen the campsite at, and from the light, I was 100% sure it was a campfire. I got up, and probably against my better judgment, started walking over there to confront them, or at least tell whoever was there that this was my property. I was gonna try to be nice about it, too. Maybe even let them finish camping the night just to not cause any inconvenience, and keep the whole interaction friendly. I really should have gotten a flashlight first, though, because as I walked up, I could barely see anything aside from the warm glow of the campfire. And when I got to the campsite, it was empty. No one was there. Just a fire burning in the middle of the trees, and a tent right next to it. Someone had to have been here just minutes ago, which made me think this person probably was watching me and saw me walking over, leaving the campsite and hiding before I got there. I started looking around a little more frantically, but everything between the trees was full of shadows. If someone was out there, I couldn't see them at all. After a minute, it got way too tense and uneasy being out there, and I started to hurry back to my cabin. I wanted to get my phone and call the police. Even if the guy ran off, I figured maybe they could investigate a little and figure out who this guy was and why he was out here. But I stopped right in the middle of the field between the woods and my cabin. My front door was wide open. The realization hit me that whoever was out here had entered my cabin while I was at the campsite. Knowing I'd been lured out or tricked and had nowhere to really go, I was horrified. I couldn't call the cops or hide in my cabin or run to get help. I just stood there in the middle of the field, stuck and unsure what the hell to do. I mean, there was nowhere to run. I needed either my phone or my car keys. I slowly crept closer to the cabin, and I noticed that all the lights in the cabin were turned off now, too. It was completely dark in there. I got right up to the front door and peered in, but didn't see any movement. "Who's in there?" I waited several seconds for any sounds, but heard nothing. So I took a couple steps in. My own heart beating felt like it was so loud, and every sense in my body was spiked up from the adrenaline. My car keys were closer than my phone was, right on the end table near the kitchen. I'm pretty sure I left my phone on the other side of the cabin in the bedroom, so I decided to just go for my car keys. After building up the courage, I quickly moved over to grab them. As I got up to the table, I saw something in the kitchen. A figure, hidden in the dark, shadowy corner of the kitchen, watching me. I bolted back toward the front door, hearing his heavy footsteps running up behind me. I slammed the door to buy me some time and hurried into my car. The man didn't let up at all, still sprinting at me as I turned the car on and started backing out. I had to do a 3-point turn, and he caught up just enough to grab one of the door handles and open it slightly before I pulled away. I made it out just milliseconds before he could get in. I drove all the way to the police station in town. The whole drive, all I could think about was how close that encounter was, and that man was still at my cabin. He could be doing anything, and there was nothing I could do to stop him. And obviously, that anxiety was with me during the whole time I waited at the police station for word back on the officers they sent to investigate. And I almost couldn't believe it when one of the officers reported back that the person had attempted to burn down my cabin. They found the fireplace raging, loaded with a mountain of wood that flooded into the whole living room. It's a miracle the floors or ceiling didn't catch, and the officers that were there were able to tame it enough to keep it at bay until the fire department could smother it. The only evidence left behind of the man was the ashes in his campsite. Everything else, including himself, was gone without trace. The whole thing was elevated to such a horrifying level, knowing he was trying to harm me, and had probably been stalking me for days, or weeks, watching my cabin from the woods. And I didn't have any idea who he was or why he was doing any of it. I didn't stay at my cabin for a single night after that, having movers pack and move everything to a new place far away from there. The crime investigation went on for months after that, but without new leads, it didn't ever come to much, and ultimately things fizzled out. I don't think I'll ever know what was planned for me, or how bad things really could have gotten out at that cabin.
I've never been the kind of guy who's great at planning ahead. My ex would probably tell you I live life in a permanent state of good enough. I'm a single dad now. My daughter Mia is 8, and when she's with me, I try to keep things as stable and normal as I can. But when she's not, I'll admit my apartment looks like it was decorated by a guy who thinks folding chairs count as living room furniture. Back in February of 2021, I had just moved into a new apartment in Spokane. 2 bedrooms, linoleum kitchen floor, and a view of the parking lot that I kept pretending was urban rustic. My budget wasn't stretching very far, So I did what I always do when I need something but don't want to pay full price. I hit Craigslist. Craigslist is basically the single dad's IKEA. You don't go there for beauty or design. You go there because someone's unloading a dresser for 50 bucks. And if you squint hard enough, you can pretend it's vintage.
Working across teams is tough, but Asana helps you handle it. Asana AI can spot roadblocks and assign work to keep everything on track. That's how work gets handled. Visit us at asana.com.
What I really needed was a couch. My old one had given up the ghost months earlier. Springs poking through the cushions, duct tape holding one armrest together. Mia used to bounce on it like a trampoline until I had visions of her disappearing inside it like a sinkhole. I'd tossed it during the move and told myself, first paycheck in the new place, I'll get something halfway decent. Scrolling Craigslist, I found one that looked okay. Brown microfiber, a little lumpy, but the pictures showed it in decent shape. The ad said $80, must pick up, non-smoker household. 80 bucks was right in my sweet spot, cheap enough to ignore the little voice in my head whispering, this might smell like someone's wet dog. I borrowed my buddy's pickup, loaded it up, and dragged it into my apartment with the kind of sweaty pride only a divorced guy with zero upper body strength can understand. I set it in place, stepped back, and thought, yeah, looks like a couch. Mission accomplished. That first night, I stretched out on it with a frozen pizza and Netflix. The thing wasn't exactly comfortable. Cushions sagged in weird spots, like maybe the last owner had a favorite nap position they refused to change for 10 years. Still, it beat sitting on the floor. It took a couple of days before I realized something was off. The smell. Not overpowering, not like cat pee or anything, but faint, stale, like old sweat mixed with something musty. I figured maybe it had been in a basement. I sprayed Febreze until the air practically shimmered and moved on. Then little things started showing up. One night, I shifted in my seat and heard a metallic clink. Reaching between the cushions, I fished out a quarter. No big deal. Couches eat coins. The next day, while vacuuming, I saw a hair tie tumble out from under the seat. Pink, stretched out, with a single strand of dark hair still knotted into it. I don't keep hair ties, and Mia's are all rainbow-colored ones from Target. I told myself it was normal. People lose stuff in couches. That's practically what they're for. But as the days went on, it became more. A grocery receipt crumpled into a tight ball, dated from almost a year earlier. A movie ticket stub so faded I could barely make out the title. A bobby pin. A nail file. It was like the couch was coughing up someone else's life in fragments. By then, curiosity had gotten under my skin. One Saturday, when Mia was at her mom's, I decided to go full excavation mode. I pulled out the cushions, stuck my arm in as far as it would go, and swept my hand back and forth. My fingers brushed something flat and papery. I pinched it and pulled. It was a notebook. A small black leather-bound journal, elastic strap hanging loose. I sat there on the floor staring at it, heart thumping harder than I wanted to admit. For a second, I thought, cool. Maybe it's full of sketches or a diary. Something artsy. But even then, part of me knew it wasn't going to be anything simple. I opened it. Even before reading it, the handwriting made me uneasy. Tight, cramped, almost angry. Words jammed together like the writer couldn't slow down. On the surface, it was harmless. Dates, a description of someone named Elle. Apparently, Elle was beautiful. Perfect. Always wearing blue sneakers. I flipped forward. The entries spiraled quickly. The writer described watching Elle at coffee shops, following her car, writing down what she ate, who she spoke to. She didn't notice me today, but she will. My stomach flipped hard. The deeper I read, the worse it got. Pages of rambling fixations, her smile, her hair, the way she never locked her back gate. The handwriting slanted harder, black ink digging deep into the page. If she won't talk to me, I'll make her. And then, one entry that stopped me cold. No one's seen her since Tuesday. They're putting up posters. But I know where she is. I shut the journal like it burned me. I sat there on the floor of my apartment, journal in my lap, realizing I was holding something that might have belonged to what? A stalker. Worse. My mouth was dry. I felt stupid for even touching it without gloves. For a while, I just stared at the couch. That stupid $80 couch. Had someone hidden it in there, forgotten it, or left it there on purpose? The next morning, I took the journal to the police station. The officer at the desk flipped through it. He asked me how I got it. I told him, Craigslist couch, found it stuffed inside. He jotted something down and told me they'd take a look. That was it. No explanations, no reassurance, just we'll take it from here. I left feeling like I'd handed over a piece of poison and had no idea where it had leaked from. Weeks passed. The police never called me back. I thought about following up, but honestly, part of me didn't want to know. I didn't want confirmation that what I'd read was connected to some real missing person. Some family out there putting up posters while the writer of that journal sat in their living room scribbling fantasies. The couch stayed in my apartment. I couldn't afford another one, not right away. But I hated it. Every time I sat down, I wondered who else had sat there before me. What they'd been thinking, what they'd written. When Mia visited, she'd sprawl out with her tablet, legs dangling over the armrest, and I'd force a smile while my skin crawled. I never told her about the journal. Some things kids don't need to carry. A few months later, I finally saved enough to buy a new couch from a discount furniture store. The old one, I didn't even try to sell it. I dragged it out back, shoved it next to the dumpsters, and left it there in the rain. Still, I couldn't let it go. Every thrift shop find, every piece of furniture I brought home after that, I checked it. Pulled out drawers, flipped cushions, ran my hands along seams like a lunatic. Most of the time, I found nothing but dust. But every time, I thought about that journal, the way the ink dug into the paper. The sentence, I know where she is. I'll never know if it was real or just the ramblings of someone unstable. But the not knowing, that's what sticks with me. Now, whenever I sit on a couch, mine, a friend's, even at a doctor's office, I wonder what might be stuffed inside. What secrets people leave behind waiting for someone else to find. I learned the hard way. Sometimes the ugliest part of an object isn't what you see. It's what someone left behind inside it. Des Moines in December is so quiet, you can hear the house complain to itself. The furnace shutting off, the house creaking as it cools. I'm 31, a freelance editor for YouTube channels, and most nights I worked late at the dining table while my husband Matthew slept down the hall. The baby monitor was always at my elbow, screen showing my 5-month-old son Theo asleep in his crib. It was our routine. Bath, bottle, a silly whale projector that tossed fake stars on the ceiling, then sound machine set to rain. Nothing fancy, but it worked. The monitor gave me peace of mind, and I relied on it more than I cared to admit. The first whisper came so faint I thought I'd imagined it. It's okay. I looked at the screen. Theo was curled up, sound asleep. The green audio bar on the monitor flickered normally. Static, hiss, the soft patter of rain sounds. I convinced myself it was interference. Baby monitors pick up weird things. Radios, phones, even neighbors' devices. But a few nights later, close to 2 in the morning, I heard it again, clearer this time. Go back to sleep. That one made me stop what I was doing. The voice wasn't mine. It wasn't Matthew's. It was calm, the exact tone I used at Theo's crib. When I walked down the hall and peeked into the nursery, it was silent except for the sound machine. Matthew shrugged it off. Probably radio interference, he said. I tried to believe him, but I started keeping notes. December 12th, 2:18 a.m., it's okay. December 14th, 3:01 a.m., go back to sleep. December 18th, 1:56 a.m., good baby. Always the same soothing words. We tried everything. Resetting the monitor, changing frequencies, moving it away from the router, even replacing it. But no matter what we did, the whispers kept slipping through. The night that broke me was December 21. Theo stirred in his crib. On the monitor, I heard, good baby, go back to sleep. The words were so close. I carried the receiver down the hall. When I opened the nursery door, the whisper didn't cut out. It was still there, not through the handheld, but in the room itself, coming from the monitor camera's tiny speaker. I yanked the plug. The voice stopped mid-syllable. Just like that. We returned that monitor the next morning and bought a new brand, one with encryption and all the right promises. For 2 nights, nothing happened. Then, on the 3rd night, it's okay. That's when I called the manufacturer, then the internet company, then eventually the police. Everyone gave the same answers: interference, cross-signal, harmless tech glitches. But none of those explanations matched the timing. The way the words always landed right after Theo stirred, like whoever it was could see him. I tried recording it on my phone, but the voice never came when I was prepared. It seemed to know. The scariest part wasn't the words themselves, it was how ordinary they sounded. Kind, gentle. The same phrases I used every night. Hearing them from someone or something else made the nursery feel like it didn't belong to us anymore. We locked down every setting, even pulled an old analog audio monitor out of storage. That one hissed and popped like a campfire, but it was honest noise. The sleek new one still whispered. Eventually, the frequency of it slowed, but it never stopped completely. Some nights I'd wake up for no reason, heart pounding, and wait, listening for that familiar voice. Other nights it would slip in casually. Shh. Just one word, enough to wreck the rest of my night. I still don't know what it was. Rationally, I can tell you about interference, stray signals, maybe even someone hacking into baby monitors. But deep down, I can't shake the memory of standing in the nursery that night, holding my son, while a voice that wasn't mine whispered comfort into his room. Now, even with Theo older, I still keep the monitor volume low. I still tape over LEDs. And every so often, in the middle of the night, I'll lie awake, listening for a voice that doesn't belong to us. I live in Denver and do a little photography work. Senior portraits, small business products, but mostly I just love taking pictures. Back in April 2021, a group of friends and I went on a weekend trip. City wandering, mountain overlooks, and too much diner food. When we got home, I sat down at my desk to do what I love most: sort, edit, and relive the trip frame by frame. I started scrolling through the pictures like always: composition, light, balance. Then one detail snagged me. A man, just barely in frame, left side, like a mistake. Baseball cap, dark windbreaker, hands in his pockets. At first look, nothing special, just another background stranger. But the way his chin lifted made it seem like he knew I was there. I moved on. In city photos, there are always people in the background. But later, while editing shots from the overlook in the mountains, I spotted him again. This time farther away, standing on the next ridge over. Same cap, same jacket, same squared off posture. I felt that clench in my core. I wanted to believe it was just a coincidence. Lots of people wear dark jackets and caps. But as I kept going through the weekend folder, I saw him again, reflected in a bakery window, blurred but there. And again in a street photo where he was the only one facing the camera while everyone else looked elsewhere. In a group diner shot, he appeared through the window across the street, chin lifted the same way as before. What unsettled me wasn't just that he showed up in multiple photos, it was the way he always faced me. I tested myself, zooming in, trying to disprove it. Maybe I was imagining similarities. But even Lightroom's face recognition tagged him across different photos. 4 locations, 2 days, always aligned with my lens. I showed a couple of friends. They laughed it off. "You've got a fan," one said. Another shrugged, "Coincidence." I tried to laugh along, but that guy's body language was messing with my head. He wasn't just in the photos, he was aware of them. I printed a contact sheet of the shots where he appeared. On paper, the pattern was worse. In every photo, his stance was the same. Shoulders squared, chin raised a fraction, not looking at the view or the crowd, looking at me. What gnawed at me was the crosswalk photo. I'd taken it through the car windshield, a blurry nothing shot. But there he was again, stepping off the curb, lined up perfectly with the camera. Out of all the frames that weekend, that one convinced me the most. He hadn't just wandered into the background. He'd been following us. Nothing happened on the trip itself. No one approached us. No weird encounters. If you'd asked me right after, I would have said it was a great weekend. But the photos told another story. Someone had been watching, and not just watching, but making sure I saw him later. Who do you call for something like that? I mean, what could I even say? It sounded ridiculous, even in my head. "Excuse me, officer, I think someone's stalking me through pictures." Instead, I adjusted my habits. I stopped geotagging photos online, and I delayed posting until after I'd left a place. The others forgot about it. They teased me a little, but to them, it was just background noise. For me, it stuck. Photography used to mean freezing good moments. Now I zoom into every corner of every shot, afraid of what I'll find staring back. The truth is, I'll never know who he was. Maybe a traveler with the same itinerary. Maybe someone who noticed the camera and wanted to play with it. Or maybe someone who wanted me to notice him and no one else. I still shoot, still love it. But I can't look at a set of photos without scanning the background now, waiting to see if he's there again. Cap, jacket, chin lifted, facing straight toward me. Because a photo always says, "I was here." And those frames whisper back, "So was I." I've been a paramedic long enough to know nights in Albuquerque don't usually leave room for imagination. When you're on shift, you're running on vitals, addresses, and timestamps. The rest is just noise. But some calls don't fade when the night ends. They cling to you. This was February 2020, late shift. Rivas and I were staged near Coors, parked in a half-empty lot. He scrolled through scores on his phone while I flicked a glove like a rubber band. The usual calm before dispatch cracked the air. Medic 8, respond code 2, difficulty breathing, adult male. Family on scene. Albuquerque fire en route. We pulled out. The farther south we drove, the thinner the city lights got. When we hit the address, the headlights swept across a small house tucked off the road, brush creeping in on both sides. And in front of it, motionless, was a girl. 15, maybe 20 yards past the fence line. A girl in a hospital gown, bare legs, bare feet. her face pale, her hair dark, hanging limp. "Rivas," I said. "Look." He leaned forward, squinting. "What? All I see is the tree line." I didn't argue, but I couldn't take my eyes off her. Then the front door opened, and a woman started waving frantically, pulling me back to the call. Inside, the patient sat in a recliner, gasping, lips dusky. Classic COPD exacerbation. I wrapped a cuff, clipped a sat probe, looped oxygen over his ears. Rivas prepped a neb while the wife tried not to cry. Fire rolled in with their big bags. One of them asked if we wanted the yard swept. I said after we move him, because duty came first. We transferred him, blanket tucked, monitor clipped. As we wheeled him out, I looked back to the tree line. Empty. The pale figure was gone. In the back, I rode with him, switching nebulizers, watching SATs creep up. At the hospital, the respiratory therapist took over. While his wife signed paperwork, I asked the charge nurse, "Any gown wanderers tonight? Teen, maybe 20, dark hair?" She shook her head. "Not from here. We'd have a report if someone left." But I knew what I'd seen. I spent half my life looking at those gowns. What won't leave me is the moment before we loaded him. I'd look back once more, just out of habit. For a second, less than a blink, I thought I saw her again. Closer. Same pale legs, same loose gown. But it was the angle that stuck. Her head was tilted toward me, not the house. And though she was far enough that I couldn't see her eyes, I felt watched. Not like a passerby, not like someone curious. Watched, as if she'd been waiting. Then Rivas said, "Let's move," and I turned back. By the time I looked again, there was nothing but branches shifting in the wind. Fire swore their sweep found nothing. The hospital confirmed no patients had walked off. And yet, that stillness, the way she hadn't moved, hadn't called out, burned into me. People in distress wave or stumble or at least look toward help. She didn't. She stood like someone had set her at the edge of the dark and told her to stay put. Weeks later, the call still gnawed at me. Then one evening, we were staged near that same stretch when an older fire medic struck up conversation. I mentioned the girl, half joking, fishing for some rational explanation. His face didn't change. "You're not the first," he said. "A couple years back, a rookie swore he saw a patient in a gown standing near the boss gang. Same thing. Looked too clean, too still. He called it in, but nobody was missing." Another medic chimed in, lowering his voice. "They say a girl from the state psych hospital ran off in the 90s. Never found her. Some of the old-timers call her the Watcher. Shows up near the tree line, disappears if you blink. Always in a gown." They laughed it off after, but not in a funny way. More like guys whistling past a graveyard. I'm not saying I believe in ghosts. I'm not saying I don't. But I'll tell you this. I know what I saw, and I know what I felt. The weight of being observed. Funny how one call changes things. That stretch used to mean nothing. Now I check the tree line. Not because I expect to see her, but because part of me fears I will. That's the call that stuck with me. Not the COPD patient, not the neb I hung, or the stats I charted. The girl in the gown who stood too still, who left no trace, who may or may not have been there at all. And I'll be honest. Sometimes I wonder if one night, when I pass that stretch of road again, she'll be closer than before. I was 28 back in grad school, living in student housing in Illinois. It wasn't glamorous. Just a beat-up 2-bedroom unit with creaky floors, paper-thin walls, and heat that only worked when it felt like it. Rent was cheap, though, and in a place like Ithaca, that's enough to keep you from complaining too much. My roommate Jeremy was another grad student. We weren't close friends, but we got along. He was a little older than me, 30 or so, quiet, clean, kept to himself. He told me once he used to have a sleepwalking problem when he was younger, but outgrew it. That's exactly how he said it, like it was a bad haircut that had grown out. At the time, I thought it was just another weird detail people throw around to make conversation. I didn't know that information would come back to haunt me. It was a Wednesday night, back in 2019. I'd stayed up late, grading papers, when I finally crawled into bed around 2 in the morning. I remember the room being oppressively quiet, the kind of silence that makes you too aware of your own breathing. At some point, I woke up. No noise, no sudden movement, just that eerie sense that something was off. I rolled over and nearly jumped out of my skin. Jeremy was standing at the foot of my bed. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring down at me. His eyes were wide open, glassy but unfocused. His lips were slightly parted, like he was mid-thought but never finished. I sat up and whispered, "Jeremy, you good, man?" No reaction. I tried again, louder this time. "Jeremy." That's when he leaned slightly forward and, in this low, flat voice, whispered, "I'm waiting for him to move." Every hair on my body stood up. I didn't even know how to respond. I just sat there, staring at him, until he slowly turned his head, almost mechanically, and walked out of my room. His footsteps faded down the hall, soft against the old wooden floors. I sat there for at least 10 minutes, heart racing, before I finally got up, locked my door, and forced myself back into bed. The next morning, I asked him about it. He looked genuinely confused, said he hadn't sleepwalked in years, laughed it off. Man, if I did, I don't remember a thing. I wanted to believe him. Sleepwalking made sense, right? It was the logical explanation. But that sentence, "I'm waiting for him to move," played on a loop in my head. Who was him? Me? Someone else? A week later, it happened again. I woke around 3 a.m. The hall light was on. My door was cracked open, even though I always shut it tight. When I looked out, I saw Jeremy just standing in the hallway, facing my door. Not moving, not blinking. This time I didn't say anything. I just slid out of bed, pushed the door shut, and locked it. The next morning, he acted normal, cooking oatmeal, humming to himself. I asked if he turned the hall light on last night. He shook his head. "Nope, must have been you." But I knew it wasn't. The third time was the worst. It was almost the end of January. I'd been trying to ignore the unease, telling myself it was just stress or lack of sleep. But that night proved it wasn't just in my head. I woke again to the same silence. And there he was, closer than ever. Not at the foot of the bed this time. He was standing right next to me. I could see every detail of his face in the faint glow from the streetlight outside. His eyes were open, staring straight down at me. His breathing was slow. Before I could say anything, he whispered again. Same monotone voice. "He's almost ready." That was it for me. I shot upright, shoved him back, and yelled his name. He blinked rapidly, looking confused, like he had just snapped out of something. Then he muttered, "What the hell?" and stumbled out of the room. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I confronted him. He swore up and down he didn't remember a thing. Said maybe I was dreaming, maybe I was stressed. He got defensive, like I was accusing him of something. But here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. A few days later, while cleaning up the living room, I found Jeremy's old notebook wedged under the TV shelf. I couldn't help myself, so I flipped through it. Most of it was class notes, but toward the back there were pages filled with fragmented sentences, written over and over, like someone scribbling in a trance. He will move. He is almost ready. Don't wake him yet. I slammed the notebook shut and shoved it back where I found it. I didn't want him to know I'd seen it. I moved out 2 weeks later, under the excuse of needing more space. To this day, I don't know if Jeremy was really sleepwalking or if something else was going on. I don't know if he even realized what he was saying, or if those words were meant for me at all. But sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night and swear I can still hear that whisper. I'm waiting for him to move. And I have a feeling that one day I'll find out exactly who him is. If you're suddenly very aware of the darkness behind you, yeah, same here. Smash that like button, hit subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and
The bloodthirsty Chupacabra has been sighted in the new Diabolical Desert structure deck for my card game. A human stalker on the way from work, an inhuman stalker under your house that takes your things, and a folklore stalker in the woods that haunts your dreams and takes people to never be seen again. Enjoy. These are tales from the break room. Why I Quit My Forest Ranger Job. From Turner. I've been a forest ranger for a few years. I won't specify exactly where, as I don't want to draw any unwanted attention or cause concern among visitors or locals. What I'm about to share has been haunting me, and I feel compelled to get it off my chest. It all began a few months ago when I started to have unsettling dreams. At first, I didn't pay them much mind. Dreams are just fragments of our subconscious, right? But these felt different. They felt real. In the first dream, I found myself standing at the edge of a campsite deep within the woods. There was a lone figure sitting by a dying fire. The flames flickered weakly, casting long, distorted shadows among the trees. The figure's back was to me, but I could hear it speaking. At first, it sounded like murmurs, overlapping voices that were hard to make out. As I strained to listen, I realized the voices were eerily familiar, mimicking tones and inflections of people I knew. Just as I tried to step closer, I woke up abruptly, my heart pounding. I dismissed it as just another odd dream, perhaps brought on by stress or fatigue. A week later, a young couple came into the ranger station, looking visibly shaken. They couldn't have been more than 21 or 22 years old, likely college kids enjoying a weekend getaway. The guy introduced himself as Rod, and his girlfriend was Hannah. They'd camped in one of the more secluded areas of the park, seeking some privacy away from the usual crowds. Rod started. "We need to report something strange that happened to us last night." Hannah chimed in. "We're not sure if it was someone playing a prank on us or if it was something else." I gestured for them to sit down. "All right then. Go ahead, tell me what happened." Rod started. "We set up camp yesterday afternoon. Had a normal evening, cooking some dinner and chatting for a bit. Around 11 p.m., we turned in for the night. We made sure to put out the fire completely before going to sleep, and we didn't leave any food or trash out." Hannah interrupted. "I'm meticulous about those sorts of things. I doused the fire thoroughly and checked everything on the ground." "Anyway," Rod continued, "sometime in the middle of the night, we didn't check the time, we woke up to the sound of our fire crackling again." Hannah picked up from there, which was weird because, again, we put the fire out. And it wasn't just that, we heard voices. It was our voices. I remember raising an eyebrow super fast. "Your voices?" "Yes," she insisted. "We unzipped the tent just enough to peek out, and there, sitting by the fire, was someone or something that looked like a person. One figure doing the perfect impression of both our voices talking to itself." Rod looked nervous. He, or it, I don't know, they were repeating a conversation we'd had earlier, almost word for word. It was like listening to a recording of ourselves, I felt a chill. Did you see its face? Hannah shook her head. It was too dark to see details, but the way it moved, the way it spoke, it was disturbing. What did you do when you saw it? I asked. Rod admitted. We were terrified. We didn't dare make a sound, we just watched it, until eventually the figure stood up and walked back into the woods. Did you notice anything else unusual? Any other campers nearby? Hannah looked at me. That's just it. We chose that spot because it was so isolated. There should not have been anyone else out there. I nodded slowly. All right, I'll file a report and have some rangers check out the area. In the meantime, it might be best if you camp closer to the main grounds, or consider staying in one of our cabins. They agreed, but were still visibly unnerved. After they left, I sat at my desk, thinking about their story. It was hard to believe, yeah, but not entirely impossible. It was definitely creepy, though. Perhaps some prankster was out there, messing with the campers. I made a note to discuss it with the team. That evening, I brought it up during our briefing. We've had a report of some unusual activity near the eastern campsites. A couple claimed they had an intruder in their campsite in the middle of the night, mimicking them, repeating their own conversations. My colleagues exchanged glances and raised eyebrows, mirroring my original expression. One of them, Cherie, shrugged. Could be some kids messing around. Maybe, I replied. But let's keep an eye out nonetheless. If someone's out there causing disturbances, we have to address it. After the meeting, I caught up with Donnie, a fellow ranger and a close friend of mine. Donnie had been with the park a bit longer than I had, and we've shared countless shifts and stories over the years. That was a strange report, huh? He remarked. Yeah, got me thinking, though. About what? Man, I've been having some weird dreams lately. Probably nothing, but it's really weird timing. Donnie asked. Weird how? I told him about the dream of the figure by the fire. He listened thoughtfully. Could just be a coincidence, he said. But if it makes you feel better, we can swing by that campsite tomorrow, check it out. I appreciated the offer. Thanks, yeah, might be a good idea. The next day, we headed out to the campsite in question. It was a clear day, sun high in the sky. The site looked undisturbed. We searched for any signs of other campers or evidence of a prank. Footprints, discarded items, anything like that. But we didn't find anything unusual. Well, dang, maybe they spooked themselves, Donnie sighed. Maybe so, I thought, though something still felt wrong about the whole thing. A few days later, I had another dream. This time, I was standing at the base of one of our old Firewatch towers, deep in the forest. The tower loomed over me, metal frame rusted in places but still sturdy. At the top, I could see a figure pacing back and forth behind the glass. I climbed the steps, with each one groaning and creaking under my weight. As I made it to the top and opened the door, the figure turned to face me. It was indistinct, shadowy, but its eyes were piercing. It raised an arm and pointed directly at me, then slowly shifted its finger to point out the window, towards something unseen. I followed its gaze, but saw only darkness. Suddenly, the floor beneath me gave way, and I was falling. I jolted awake, my heart racing. The following morning, a fellow ranger named Marcus came into the station looking unsettled. Marcus is a seasoned ranger, known for his composure and level-headedness. Seeing him disturbed by anything was highly unusual. You okay? I asked. He rubbed the back of his neck and told me. I'll be darned, had a strange experience last night. We sat down together, and he told me about it. I was assigned to check on the North Firewatch Tower, he began, We've been having some issues with the radio equipment up there. I nodded. Yep, I remember that. Did you get it sorted out? Eventually. But on the way there, something weird happened. I was driving the ATV along the main trail, and I noticed someone ahead of me, just walking. At that hour? Could you identify them? That's the thing, Marcus continued. I slowed down, thinking it might be a lost hiker. But as I got closer, they seemed to slink or fade into the shadows. I thought maybe they stepped off the trail, so I stopped and called out. But no one replied. Did you search the area? I did a quick look around, but didn't find anyone. I figured I'd better get to the tower before it was too late. He paused and took a deep breath. I got to the tower, went inside to check the equipment. About 10 minutes in, I heard footsteps on the stairs outside. I thought maybe the person I'd seen earlier had followed me. Did you get a look at him? No, and I called out again, but no one answered. There was a knock at the door, too, sudden and loud. Freaked me out. I went over, opened it, and no one was there. But it gets worse. He leaned in, his voice lower. As I looked out, I spotted a figure standing at the base of the tower, directly below me. It was too dark to make out many details, but they were tall and thin, whoever it was. They raised an arm, pointed at my ATV parked nearby. Well, did they say anything? No, Marcus replied. It just stood there, pointing. I called out to him again, but they didn't respond. After a few minutes, it turned and walked off into the woods. Well, what'd you do then? I waited for a while, unsure of what to make of it. Eventually, I decided to finish up and head back. But as I came down the tower, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching me. I asked, "Did you see the figure again?" No, but the woods felt different. They felt strange. It's hard to explain. The way this figure pointed at my ATV made me real hesitant to get back on. I asked him if he had reported it to anyone else yet. Not yet. Didn't want to sound too crazy. You're not crazy, Marcus. You're the second person to report something like this in the past week. He looked surprised. Really? I told him about the college couple's experience and my own unsettling dreams. We agreed to document everything and keep a close watch for any further incidents. That night, I shared that story with Donnie. His interest was piqued. Seems like something strange is going on here. Maybe we should do a patrol together tomorrow. See if we can find anything. Agreed, I said. The next day, we set out early, covering the areas where the incidents occurred. But we didn't encounter anything unusual. But there was a sense of unease. It almost felt like whatever was out there didn't want to be found. You simply had to wait for it to find you. And it did find someone. That evening, we decided to head back. Coincidences, man. Gotta be coincidences, Donnie said. But we still gotta keep an eye out. Just don't get too paranoid about it. Yeah, you're right, I said. That night, I had another dream. This one was the most disturbing one I'd ever had in my life. I was walking alone through a dense part of the woods. The trees were taller than real life. Their branches were intertwined and knotted up, blocking out the sky almost entirely. The air was so thick I had difficulty breathing. In the distance, I saw something hanging from one of the trees. As I moved closer, the outline became clear. There was a figure suspended upside down. I could feel a pit in my stomach then. My footsteps felt heavy, and each one echoed unnaturally. When I was only a few feet away, I realized, to my extreme horror, that it was Donnie. Donnie's skin was flayed, peeled away to reveal raw muscle and tissue. He was hanging upside down by a rope made of twisted vines and bark. Blood dripped slowly from his fingertips, pooling on the forest floor. I tried to call out to him, but you know how dreams work, especially the scary ones. No sound came from my mouth. Suddenly then, the figure from my previous dreams stepped out from behind a tree. It looked at me with empty eyes, a void where a face should be. It raised a finger to its lips in a silencing gesture, then pointed at me. I woke up drenched in sweat. I may have screamed, but I couldn't be sure. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I looked at the clock and it was 3:15 a.m. I remember those numbers so clearly. I couldn't go back to sleep after that. I sat there at the edge of my bed trying to calm myself down, but the image of skinned Donnie hanging there from the tree would not leave my mind. The next morning, I arrived at the station early. I wanted to see Donnie, just to reassure myself that it was just a nightmare. Reminded me of when I was a kid, and I would have a bad dream about my mom or dad. So I'd wake up and run right to one of them, making sure they were still alive and well and right here at home. But Donnie wasn't anywhere to be seen. Now, Donnie's shift was supposed to start at 6 a.m., and he was always a punctual guy. I waited, but by 7 a.m., there was still no sign of him. I called his cell phone then, no answer. Growing increasingly worried, I checked with the supervisor, who confirmed that Donnie had been scheduled for patrol near the western boundary the previous evening, but had not checked back in. We organized a search party immediately. Several rangers and I set out along his planned route, calling out his name and scanning the area for any signs. About 2 miles in, we found his ranger vehicle parked along a dirt road. The engine was off, and the doors were locked. Inside, everything appeared normal. There was his backpack on the passenger seat, and his water bottle was half empty. I turned back to the woods. "Donnie!" I shouted. We spread out then, searching the surrounding area. Hours passed with no sign of him. No footprints, no broken branches, nothing to indicate where Donnie might have gone. As dusk approached, we regrouped. The supervisor decided to contact the authorities, organizing a more extensive search and rescue operation. That night, I didn't eat, and I didn't sleep. That freaking dream replayed in my head over and over. The eerie similarity between the dream and Donnie's disappearance was too much to ignore. The following days were a blur. Search teams combed the forest. Dogs were brought in. But no trace of Donnie was found. I confided in Marcus about my dream. I know it sounds crazy, but I think these dreams are connected to what's happening. He looked at me. Maybe there's something more to this. Have you considered talking to someone? An expert in this sort of thing? Like who? I don't know, a psychologist? Maybe a folklore expert? I sighed. I don't think a psychologist would help. And folklore? You think this is some kind of legend coming to life? He shrugged. Stranger things have happened. We're out here in nature, man. Where old stories and folklore itself originates. Maybe there's something we're missing. I didn't dismiss the idea entirely. I was desperate for answers. I missed my friend. I did research local legends and folklore. Started to think more about those stories I heard when I was a kid and teenager. About skinwalkers and wendigos and whatnot. Stories of entities that target people and lure them into the woods through mimicry. My paranoia got to me. I decided I couldn't stay there and work there any longer. The combination of the dreams and Donnie's disappearance made me think my life could be in danger. The next morning, I went to my supervisor. "I'm putting in my 2 weeks," I said plainly. He looked up, surprised. "Effective now?" "Yep, immediately." He frowned. Is everything all right? You've been one of our best rangers. I appreciate that, but I have some personal matters I have to attend to. He eyed me for a moment, but didn't press any further. Very well, we'll process the paperwork. On my final day, I packed up my belongings from the locker room, and as I was leaving, Marcus caught up with me. So you're really going, huh? He asked. I nodded. I get it. Just take care of yourself out there. I told him to do the same. As I drove away from that park, I felt a mix of relief and deep, deep sorrow. I would never see Donnie again, and to this day, Donnie is still missing. The dreams stopped, at least, making me think that something out there was what was causing them. What really scares me is that I think I know what happened to Donnie, because I think I witnessed it in a dream. The first 2 dreams I had, they came true. The figure by the fire, with the voices. The figure at the watchtower. I dreamed about them before they happened. And then I dreamed about Donnie being skinned alive and hanging from a tree. I think someday Donnie will be found. But I'm horrified that he'll be found exactly the way I found him in my nightmare. What do you all think it was? What kind of folklore creature could do that? Please, for the love of God, let me know. If this ends up in an episode on Spotify or YouTube or whatever, comment. Tell me what you think it is. And Donnie, if you hear this, I miss you, man. The Dreaded Walk Home. From SW. I've been working at a marketing firm in Dublin for the past couple of years. It's a grand job, but lately, I've been burning the midnight oil more often than I'd like. My usual route home takes me through St. Stephen's Green, which shaves about 10 minutes off my journey compared to going around it. The park is generally peaceful at night, with the soft glow of street lamps and the distant hum of city traffic. A few weeks back, after wrapping up an especially late evening, I left the office around 10 p.m. As I stepped out onto the street, I noticed a man standing across the way. He was wearing a dark coat and seemed to be looking in my direction. I didn't think much of it at first. People do loiter about all the time, waiting for buses or whatnot. I pulled my scarf a bit tighter against the chill and started my walk home. The next night, I was late again, and as I exited the building, I saw the same man in the same spot. This time, he was smoking a cigarette. I could see the faint ember glowing in the dark. I glanced at him for a moment, and he looked back at me. His gaze was intense, but I shrugged it off and continued on my way. Over the next few days, his presence became a regular occurrence. He was always there when I left the office late, standing across the street, sometimes smoking, sometimes just watching. It started to unsettle me. One evening, as I walked past, he nodded at me. I managed a polite nod back, but quickened my pace. I mentioned this to a colleague named Fiona the next day. "There's this fella I keep seeing when I leave late," I told her. "He just stands there and stares." She figured maybe it was someone waiting on someone else, but reminded me to be careful. "Do you want me to walk out with you tonight?" she asked. I appreciated the offer, but didn't want all the fuss. "I'll be grand," I assured her. That evening, I left the office around 9 p.m. As I stepped outside, I was relieved to not see the man. I began my usual walk towards St. Stephen's Green. The park entrances are well lit, and there are usually a few people about, even at that hour. As I entered the park, I felt a bit more at ease. The familiar path and the rustling of leaves in the evening breeze were comforting. About halfway through, I had the sudden feeling that someone was behind me. I glanced over my shoulder but saw no one. I laughed at myself for being paranoid. The following night, I left work even later, close to 11 p.m. The streets were much more quiet, and as I stepped outside, there he was again, across the street. This time he was closer to the corner, partially hidden in the shadows. It made my heart skip a beat. I decided to ring a taxi instead of walking. But after waiting 10 minutes with no luck, I gave up and started on foot. As I approached the entrance to St. Stephen's Green, I hesitated. The park looked darker than usual. The streetlights seemed dimmer. I told myself I was being silly and proceeded along the path. A few minutes in, I heard footsteps behind me. They were faint, but matched my pace. I stopped, and so did the footsteps. I turned around, but the path was empty. I could feel my pulse quickening. I began to walk again, faster than before. The footsteps resumed, keeping up with me. "Hello?" I called out, trying to sound confident, but probably failing. I didn't hear anyone say anything. I decided to cut across the grass towards the exit, instead of following the winding path. As I hurried, I stumbled over something and nearly fell. Regaining my balance, I looked down and saw a small folded piece of paper. Against my better judgment, I picked it up and opened it. Inside, in neat handwriting, was my name. A cold shiver ran down my spine. How did this get here? Who left it? And why was my name on it? I stuffed the note into my pocket and broke into a jog. The exit was just ahead. As I reached the gate, I glanced back one more time, and I saw a figure standing under a tree, partially obscured by shadows. It was him. I knew it. He was just standing there, watching me. I ran the rest of the way home, not stopping until I was safely inside my flat. My hands were trembling as I locked the door behind me and double-checked the windows, drawing the curtains. I pulled out the note and stared at my name written on it. That night, I could barely sleep a wink. The next day at work, I told Fiona everything. She was alarmed. "You need to report this," she insisted. "To who? The Gardaí? What am I going to tell them? That some bloke is standing around and I found a piece of paper with my name on it?" She frowned. "It's better to be safe than sorry. At least let security know." I agreed to that and informed the building's security team. They said they would keep an eye out and offered to escort me out if I was leaving late again. That evening, I left work on time, actually, determined to avoid any more encounters. As I walked out with a group of colleagues, I felt more comfortable and safe. There was no sign of the man either. Over the weekend, I tried to relax and put the incident out of my mind. By Monday, I'd convinced myself that maybe it was all a misunderstanding. Monday night, however, I had to stay late again. As the office emptied out, I felt a growing sense of dread. Fiona had already left, and I was one of the last people in the building. I asked the security guard to walk me out. As we exited, there was no sign of that man. I thanked the guard and started my walk home, alone, deciding to avoid the park this time, and to take the longer route along the main roads. Halfway home, after an uneventful walk, I stopped at a convenience shop to pick up a few bits. As I browsed the aisles, I caught a glimpse of someone outside the window. It was him. He was standing across the street, looking right at me. I began to panic. I approached the cashier, trying to keep my voice steady. "Excuse me, could you please call the Gardaí? I think someone is following me." The cashier looked concerned and nodded. "Of course." I waited inside the shop until 2 officers arrived. I explained my situation, and they stepped outside to look for this man. After a few minutes, they returned. "There's no one out there matching the description," one of them said. "Are you all right to get home?" I felt a mix of frustration and fear. "I don't know. He was just out there. We could escort you if you like," the other officer offered. I took the offer gratefully. They walked me to my apartment building. As we arrived, one of the officers handed me his card. "If you see him again, ring us immediately." I gave them my thanks and went inside. That night I found myself continuously peeking out the window, half expecting to see him on the street below. But there was no one. The next morning I woke up to a message on my phone from an unknown number. It was a photo of me entering my building the night before, time-stamped just after I'd gone inside. I was sick to my stomach. How did he get my number? How long had this been going on? I went straight to the Garda station and showed them the message. They took my statement and promised to investigate further. Over the next few days, I was on edge constantly. I stopped walking anywhere alone, and I made sure I was never the last to leave the office. The Guardy kept me updated but said they hadn't found anything yet. One evening, Fiona and I decided to grab dinner after work. It was a nice change of pace, and for a while, I felt as if things were normal again. As we left the restaurant, I received another message from that unknown number. "Enjoying your night." I quickly showed Fiona the message. "He's watching us right now." We hurried back inside and called the Guardy. They arrived quickly and searched the area. But of course, they found nothing. The next day, I received an email from HR requesting a meeting. Confused, I went to see them. The HR manager looked concerned. "We've discovered a breach in our system," she said. "It appears someone accessed employee records without our permission." I shuddered. Do you know who?" I asked. "We're still looking into it, but it seems to be linked to a former employee, someone who had been terminated before you joined up." My mind was racing. Was this connected? I mean, it had to be. I began to explain to her the stalking incidents. She was alarmed and promised to assist in any way possible. Later that day, the Guardy contacted me with an update. They had identified the man as a former employee of my company, a man who had been let go under difficult circumstances. "We believe he may have accessed your personal information through company records," the officer explained. "We're going to issue a warrant for his arrest." That evening, I stayed with Fiona. I didn't feel safe alone. The next morning, the Guardy informed me that they had apprehended the man. Relief washed over me, but I still felt dirty and creeped out in a way. I changed my routines, no more late nights at the office, and I avoided walking through the park alone. It's been a few weeks since then. I'm still cautious, but life is slowly returning to normal. The company has tightened its security protocols, and I feel better knowing that that man is in custody. I wanted to share this experience as a reminder to trust your instincts and to take any unsettling occurrences seriously. Don't be afraid to ask for help, especially if you ever feel like you're being watched or even followed. Uneasy Street. From Pernitas. I'm a college student living in London. A majority of the time, classes end around 1600 hours. In winter here, the sun sets at around 1500. As you'll see, this will play a big role later on. Usually I take the bus with my friends, enjoy our laughs and conversations until we go our separate ways. For context, after I get off the bus, I have an approximately 25-minute walk to my house. This street I get off at is loud, filled with restaurants and shops. It's not some dark, empty, and creepy street. However, to get home, I usually take a shortcut on this street, veering right off this commercial street. Immediately, this street will give you bad vibes. The juxtaposition from the radiance of the main street to this one is undeniable. If you were listening to music with headphones or earbuds, this street would immediately give you the urge to take them out. It goes for around 300 meters or so. It's slim, and there are apartments on one side and a brick wall on the other. The worst thing is undoubtedly the silence. Maybe on a rare occasion, once a month, I would see one person walk through the street. Only the faint, far sound from the distant sirens can be heard when you pass through it. Last but not least, it's not a well-lit street. There's a street light every few meters or so, but they're pretty dim, and altogether, it's quite dark. This particular day, as usual, I took off my earbuds when I started to walk through the road. Occasionally, I would turn around. I would get this feeling. I know it sounds cliché, but that particular day I just had a sensation. Something inside me was begging me to be careful and watchful. I forgot to mention, but during the halfway point, there is a short part, possibly around 30 meters long, of complete pitch darkness. In that spot, the houses and walls are replaced by empty roads with no end. Every time I walk through that short section, I take it upon myself to speed walk until I reach the light again. That day, as I neared the dark interval, I heard a very faint yet undeniable rustling. Strange, I thought. Now, London isn't a particularly safe city, so I considered that there might be some sort of mugging involved. Yet, I was in for much, much worse. I stopped for a second, listening closely. Hey, maybe it's a fox, I thought. I waited, but heard nothing. I continued my stride and sped up my pace as I entered the complete darkness. Simultaneously, two things happened. First, there was a ruffling sound, only louder. Second, I saw something off to my right in the dark. It was a horrifying figure. A gaunt, white, and pale face contrasted to the dark. When I heard stories like these on the podcast, I cast them off as people exaggerating or lying for attention. That second there, though, I felt true fear for the first time in my life. The figure's eyes were glossy and black, its body thin and white. It made a sound that was similar to a pig and a human's cry mixed. Every few seconds, I would turn. That thing never came out of the pit of darkness. I only saw its disgusting face staring at me. But I didn't care. I quickly made my way home in record time that day, and I never saw that thing again since. I really don't know what I saw. I can't really recall anything else about the creature. I don't know a lot about cryptids, but if anyone does, I'd really appreciate some insight. I still haven't taken that shortcut on my way to or from college again, and I don't plan to. Waffle House Freezer Incident. From Beck from Heck. For a while, a few years back, I worked as a manager on the night shift at a Waffle House. It was a busy spot, especially after midnight, because the bars would close and the late-night crowd would roll in. I won't mention the city. I want to keep this as anonymous as possible. A few weeks ago, some of the staff started to complain about a strange smell near the walk-in freezer. At first, I thought it might be the usual kitchen odors. Someone set some food somewhere and completely forgot about it, left it in a spot that is hard to see when you're just walking past. Or maybe someone dropped something and it's been rotting for days. We did a thorough cleaning of the area, though, but the smell was still there. A mix of dampness and something just rotted. I asked our line cook Chuck if he had noticed anything unusual. Chuck's a good guy, rarely complains about anything. He shrugged at me and told me it was just the mop bucket. He could be right. When that thing hasn't been cleaned out or people leave water in it, stinks up the whole place. I checked the cleaning supplies and the mop bucket, but everything seemed fine. In fact, the yellow bucket seemed to have been cleaned recently, but I could still smell that weird smell by the freezer. Now, the smell was not constant. It would come and go at odd times. But sometimes, when it was strong, it would be bad enough to make you wrinkle your nose. Other times, it would just vanish completely. It was a Waffle House mystery. One night, as we were closing up, one of our servers, well called Jenna, approached me. She looked nervous and asked if I'd ever felt weird or strange near the freezer. I asked what she meant by strange. She explained like someone watching you or cold spots even outside the freezer. I laughed right away and said, "It's a freezer, it's supposed to be cold." "Even right outside of it? And this is a different cold," she tried to explain. "Like a chill that goes right through your body." I shook my head, telling her I hadn't noticed anything like that yet, but that I would keep my eye out. Over the next few days, more staff mentioned odd experiences. We had a server named Luis. He heard faint whispering when he was grabbing supplies from the storeroom next to the freezer. And at first, as these stories and experiences piled up, I thought they were feeding off of each other's imaginations. But the reports were consistent enough to make me wonder. So I asked around. We have an older employee named Eugene, who, legend has it, has been with the restaurant since it opened. He pulled me aside one day, and he told me there was an old story about the place. Of course, I leaned in and asked what he was talking about. "Back when the building was first used as a diner, before it became a Waffle House, a worker got trapped in the freezer, and the door malfunctioned and they couldn't get him out in time." "I haven't heard that one before," I told him. "They tried to keep it quiet. Bad for business." I remember thinking later that night, the story would line up. If ghosts were real, there could be one stinking up our freezer then. I decided to check the freezer door myself. The thing was heavy, but seemed to function properly. The safety latch on the inside worked when I tested it. Then again, that was an old story, right? So by then, they would have fixed it. Probably fixed it or tinkered with it several times over the years. I figured old buildings come with old stories, that there's a logical explanation for everything. A few nights after that, we had a very busy shift. We ran low on hash browns. I asked Chuck to grab some from the freezer. He headed back without a word. A few minutes passed by and orders were piling up. I glanced at the clock. Chuck had been gone for over 10 minutes. "Where's Chuck?" I called out. Jenna shook her head. "Didn't he go to the freezer?" Instantly, I felt a knot in my stomach. I walked quickly to the back. When I made it to the freezer, the door was closed. That was odd. We usually kept it propped open during busy hours for quick and easy access. I pulled on the handle and it resisted for a moment before finally giving way. Inside, Chuck was wide-eyed and sitting on the floor, his back against a stack of boxes. His face was pale. "Chuck, are you okay?" I rushed to his side. He looked at me, his breath visible in the cold air. "The door wouldn't open." I grabbed his arm and helped him to his feet, and by God, he was cold. "Christ almighty, the latch must have jammed. Let's get you out of here." We stepped into the warm hallway. I could see him still shivering. I felt so bad. "I tried the handle. Just wouldn't move. I was pounding the door. I don't think anybody heard me." "Geez, Chuck, how long were you in there?" "I don't know. Felt like a while." I quickly got him to the break room and got him a hot cup of coffee. "Take a few minutes, all right? I'll get someone to look at the door." He stopped me before I left. saying that he heard something in there. I asked what he meant. Maria, I swear I heard whispering in there. I thought someone was in there with me. Chuck wasn't the type to make things up like that, but it could have been the cold getting to his head. Maybe it was the fans or the compressor. He shook his head. He was confident it was a voice that he could not make out what it was saying, but he said it was right behind him. I didn't know what else to say. Just relax, Chuck, and get warmed up. We'll figure this out, okay? I called maintenance the next morning. The technician checked the door and the safety mechanisms. Everything's in working order, he reported. These doors are designed to not lock from the inside. Well, could it have jammed somehow? I asked. Possible, but unlikely. There's no sign of any malfunction. I thanked him and went about the day, but I was still worried. The following night, Chuck called in sick, said he wasn't feeling too well, and I couldn't blame him after that. The incident had clearly shaken him. Heck, might have even affected his immune system. Even without him, we managed to cover the shift okay, but the atmosphere in the restaurant was suspenseful. Around 2 a.m., during a quiet moment, I decided to check the freezer myself. I propped the heavy door open with a crate and stepped inside. The cold enveloped me instantly. I scanned the shelves, checking inventory, trying to distract myself from the growing sense of dread that I couldn't ignore very well. As I moved deeper into the freezer, the faint smell returned, stronger this time. There was a mix of dampness and rot. I turned to leave, but the crate holding open the door moved. Before I could react, the door swung shut with a heavy thud. I began to panic. I grabbed the handle and pulled, but it didn't budge. I tried the safety release, but it was stuck too. How could all of this fail at once, even after an inspection? The cold was biting, and my breath was coming out in quick, visible puffs. Any warmth I had was quickly leaving me. "Hello?" I shouted, pounding on the door. "Anyone out there?" Silence. Then, just on the edge of my hearing, I swear I heard a faint whisper. It sounded like someone saying my name. Maria. I spun around, but the freezer was empty. Another whisper, closer now. Maria. I practically screamed, "Who's there?" in response, but I didn't get a reply. The whispering grew louder, voices overlapping. I was feeling more and more claustrophobic, too. I have no idea how long I was trapped in there. Maybe a few minutes, maybe longer. But when I thought I couldn't stand it any longer, the door was opened. Jenna stood there, eyes wide. "There you are. We've been looking for you." I stumbled out. The warmth of the hallway felt so good and relieving. "The door got stuck," I managed to say. She looked at me concerned. "Are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, just cold." I didn't tell her about the whispering. I didn't want to alarm her or anyone else working here, and I didn't want to validate the rumors that were already beginning to spread. That night, after everyone left, I sat in the empty restaurant, sipping a cup of hot tea. I couldn't ignore what was going on any longer. There had to be an explanation. The next day, I called an old manager of mine, and I was scared to hear that he in fact confirmed the old story. According to him, over 25 years ago, a young man named Samuel had worked at the original diner on this site. According to the report, he was trapped in the walk-in freezer during a late-night shift. The door had malfunctioned, and with nobody around, the poor man froze to death. I sat back, the weight of hearing this settling over me. The details matched the stories the staff had been sharing. It wasn't just a legend. The next evening, I gathered the night shift team. I had only one idea of what to do next. I started with, "I need to tell you all something." And they listened attentively as I recounted what I'd heard from the old manager. Some folks gasped, others looked at me strange. "So the place is haunted?" Louise asked, half joking but obviously concerned. "I'm not sure about that, but I do think we need to acknowledge the history of the place," I said. Jenna agreed. "Maybe he's trying to reach out to us." Chuck, who had returned to work but remained quiet, finally spoke up. "What should we do?" I took a deep breath. "Maybe we could hold a small memorial, honor his memory." Most of them agreed. After closing, we gathered near the freezer. I placed a small candle by the door, then lit it. "Samuel, we're sorry for what happened to you," I said softly. "We hope you find peace, and I hope we can remain here peacefully too." Some others shared their own words, simple sentiments of respect and understanding. For a moment, I swear there was a change in the air, but maybe it was a renewed sense of confidence and safety that I had for the restaurant. In the days that followed, those strange incidents stopped. Even the smell vanished, and the freezer door functioned without issue. No more whispers, no more stink. The staff seemed more at ease, and the restaurant returned to its proper rhythm. One afternoon, as I was finishing up my paperwork, Chuck approached me. "Thanks for what you did," he said. I looked up, asking him what he means by that. "Well, for taking us all seriously, for not brushing it off. Would have been the easiest thing in the world to think we were all crazy." I smiled. Well, everyone deserves some peace, dead or alive. He smiled and chuckled a bit, then returned to the kitchen. "I don't claim to understand everything that happened. It could all easily be explained as coincidences, but perhaps it was paranormal. But I do know that acknowledging the past seemed to help all of us move forward. That Waffle House continues to serve as a late-night haven for the city. People come and people go, unaware of the stories that happen right there. And maybe that's for the best. As for me, I still manage the night shift. Every now and then, I think about Samuel and hope that wherever he is, he's finally found peace. And when I walk past the freezer, I can't help but offer a silent greeting, a small gesture to a lingering presence that, for a time, reached out from the cold in a very uncomfortable way. HVAC and things that go bump. From Arnie214. As an HVAC technician, I've seen my fair share of odd things crawling around under people's houses and even in the attics, but nothing quite like what I encountered one day. I was called out to this rural place an hour outside of town. The homeowners, I'll call them L and M, had recently moved in to an old farmhouse, and they were experiencing strange noises coming from their vents, along with cold drafts in some rooms. It was an early morning. I pulled up the long gravel driveway. The house stood among a sea of tall grass and scattered trees. Elle greeted me at the door, looking a bit frazzled. She was very appreciative of me for coming out, and she began to explain that they were hearing noises, scratching and tapping sounds specifically, and that some rooms just wouldn't warm up. I told them it was no problem. I would take a look at the system and see exactly what was going on. I started with the usual checks inside the house. The thermostat was functioning properly, and the vents were clear. Nothing seemed amiss upstairs, so I told them I'd need to inspect the ductwork underneath. The entrance to their crawl space was around the back. I ducked under the house. There wasn't a lot of light there, of course, and the air was much cooler. I clicked on a flashlight and began to maneuver my way through the maze of pipes and ducts. About 10 minutes later, I noticed something odd. Sections of insulation had been torn away. There were indeed scratch marks on the wooden beams. Looked like the work of raccoons, maybe a possum. I made a mental note to inform the homeowners they might need a pest control service instead. As I crawled deeper, my hand brushed against something metal. I shone my flashlight at it. A set of keys, rusty and covered in dust. A bit out of place, but old houses often have their quirks. I pocketed the keys to show Lisa and Mark later. A few feet further, I came across more items. An old wristwatch with a cracked face, a faded photograph of a couple from decades back, and a child's toy car. It struck me as peculiar. Why would these things be under here? Continuing my inspection, I heard a faint whisper, or at least something that sounded like it. It was weird enough to give me pause. It was soft enough I may have been imagining it. But then it came again, a hushed murmur that I couldn't quite make out. "Hello?" I called out, knowing full well there shouldn't be anyone down here. There was only silence. Shaking off the unease, I pressed on. The ductwork seemed intact, but the further I went, the more personal items I found. A bracelet now, a pocket knife, even a recent-looking keychain that said "World's Best Dad." That one looked nearly new, not like the other aged items. I heard another whisper, this time clearer. I swear it sounded like someone saying, "It should be around here." I'd said those same words moments ago myself. I pointed my flashlight around, only seeing darkness and dust. Taking a deep breath, I told myself it was just weird echoes or perhaps the wind playing tricks. Could even be the homeowners upstairs, and I could hear them talking. I reached a wider section of the crawl space where the foundation opened up a bit. There, nestled between support beams, was what looked like a makeshift nest. Insulation, bits of fabric, a bunch of other personal items arranged haphazardly. As I got closer, I saw movement at the edge of my light. Instinctively, I snapped the flashlight in that direction. My heart skipped a beat. There was a figure crouched there, eyes reflecting the light the way an animal's would, but set in a pale humanoid face. It had thin limbs, and I mean so thin, it was to the point of emaciation. I froze. The creature tilted its head, observing me with a curious expression. Then, in a voice that perfectly mimicked Elle's from before, it said, "Thanks for coming out." My mouth went dry. It shifted and held up something shiny. My wrench. I hadn't even realized I'd dropped it. The creature mimicked a chuckle and extended the wrench towards me. I managed to breathe out a thanks, reaching out slowly. As I was about to grab it, it pulled away, almost playfully. I didn't sense immediate danger, but every instinct told me to leave. Keeping my movement slow, I said, "I'm just, gonna go back out of here, okay?" It watched me and didn't follow. It seemed more interested in its collection than in me. As I crawled backward, I heard more whispering, a jumble of voices and sounds you would hear from the neighborhood. I kept my eyes on it until it was out of view. Then I turned and moved as quickly as I could without making too much noise. Emerging back into the daylight was a relief I can't describe. I took a moment to compose myself before heading back to the front door. Elle opened it before I could knock. "Did you find anything?" Well, I think you might have some sort of animal living under your house that's been, collecting things." "What kind of animal?" Em joined us in the doorway. "Oh, not sure, honestly," I lied. Could be a raccoon, maybe something else. I found a lot of missing things down there. I handed them the keys, bracelet, and a keychain. Their eyes widened. We thought we'd lost these during the move, Elle said. I highly recommend contacting a wildlife specialist, I asserted. They can safely remove whatever it is down there. Is it dangerous? Em asked. I don't think so, but it's best to handle it sooner rather than later. I wrapped up the rest of the service call as quickly as I could. As I loaded my tools back into the van, I was both confused and in utter disbelief. That was some sort of gas leak or something, I told myself, but I didn't believe it. A few days later, curiosity got the better of me. I called Elle for a follow-up. She told me they'd had a wildlife expert come out, but he hadn't found any animal under the house. They decided it must have moved on, and they were glad the noises had stopped. I was glad for them, too, because I knew what I saw. Since then, I've been more cautious on the job, paying closer attention to the spaces I crawl into. Now I feel a little guilty, not really telling them the full truth. Let me ask you this. Should I have? Should I feel bad about not? I'd rather just move on with my day job and pretend it never happened. Thanks for tuning in to Tales from the Break Room, the home of the scariest true work stories. If you want to hear your story narrated by me, send it to me at eeriecast.com/submit. We pay 5 cents per word for accepted stories. Help us grow by leaving Tales from the Break Room a rating and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast app. Check out eeriecast.com or search for EerieCast on those very same podcast apps to see our other exciting and terrifying podcasts, like Unexplained Encounters, the other show I host, where I read stories with a focus on the supernatural. To get some merch, go to